Welcome everyone to our webinar series, Beauty in Garbage City, featuring Dr. Diane Langberg. I'm your host, Phil Monroe, a psychologist and lead of Langberg Monroe and Associates here in the greater Philadelphia area. I am so delighted that you've decided to join us on this Sunday. Sundays are days of service and rest for most of us, and it's a delight to me that you took time out of your day to spend with us. For both parts, both for learning how to serve others who are hurting under the weight of trauma and abuse, and serve them well, and also how to care for your own soul. If you're like me, you're a lifelong learner, and you want to know how to do this work better, to help people recover their emotional and spiritual well-being, and to maintain your own in the same process, right? Well, if that's your interest, then you've come to the right place to join friends across 5 continents on this webinar series. I pray that this will be a balm for your soul, an encouragement and a strengthening. Let's be honest, we all sit with unspeakable stories that have been told to us by people we're walking with. These are the stories that get into us, are hard to forget. They're the stories that keep us awake at night. They're the stories that invade our dreams and even cause us to doubt some of our long-held beliefs and challenge our faith. Well, again, you're amongst friends and you're amongst people who understand. You know, over the last 20 years, I've had the good privilege of walking alongside of Dr. Langberg as she speaks and teaches us. And I've heard directly your stories, your questions, your heartfelt laments, and that really has led to the focus of this webinar series. How do we do our work with integrity and excellence? And how do we maintain ourselves in the process, knowing full well that these stories will impact us and change us? Well, in a minute, I'll introduce our star, Dr. Diane Langberg, to you. But I want to tell you a little bit about the process of what we're going to do here today. Diane's going to present for a little bit and care for us. And she is going to then take questions from you. The submitted questions, that will probably be about 20 minutes. When we're finished the Q&A process, she will begin to give us a final reflection. And then we'll have a few odds and ends for you at the very end. This recording will be sent to you in about 2 days, so you can take notes if you want, or you can sit back and just let her minister to your soul. When it comes time for the Q&A portion, please, you can submit your questions all throughout this webinar. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and when you submit that question, it goes to Dr. Langberg, myself, and our support staff in the background who are helping us collate those questions. The audience won't see your questions, but we will. Even if you want to submit it anonymously, you can, and do so by clicking the little button that's in the text portion when you submit it. So keep submitting questions, as many as you like. We'll try to get to as many as we can. If we can't get to them, we will seek ways to get those answered over the next 2 sessions on the following 2 Sundays. So with that, let me introduce to you Dr. Langberg. Dr. Langberg, I suspect all of you are familiar with her. Dr. Langberg has been in clinical practice for more than 50 years. She founded and ran Diane Langberg and Associates here in the greater Philadelphia area. It grew to 18 associates. Now she continues her clinical work with Langberg Monroe and Associates, speaking work. And you're probably very familiar with her speaking and writing. Her books that have ministered to me especially are On the Threshold of Hope, Counseling Survivors of Sexual Abuse, and 2 of her most recent volumes, which are really a love letter to the church, if you ask me, a wake-up call for us to see the character and heart of God. And those are Suffering in the Heart of God and Redeeming Power. Along the way, she's written a lot of columns for Christian counseling magazines and journals. And in those magazines and journals, She has written columns, and these columns have now been turned into a second of 2 volumes called In Our Lives First. Many of you know about that first one, which came out a few years ago, but she's just released a second volume of In Our Lives First, Meditations for Counselors, Pastors, Caregivers. And she will give one of those reflections at the end of this time. And so you don't want to miss a little snippet from that book. Dr. Langberg, welcome. Thank you for being here. And thank you in advance for the care for our souls.
You're welcome, Phil, and thank you. I am privileged and honored to be here with all of you, knowing a bit of the road that you walk and the impact that that has on you and those around you. So it is my hope and prayer that our times together and these few meetings will give you strength and hope, and also raise some questions for you about the work that you do and about yourself. So I'm going to start today in the first one talking about an odd title, Beauty in Garbage City. On the eastern edge of Cairo's city of 15 million people is a place literally called Garbage City, where thousands of people collect, sort, and generally live with and beside garbage. The people who inhabit the city are the trash collectors of Cairo. It is their livelihood. In order for us to experience Garbage City, we would have to take a taxi from Cairo and walk in from the highway through the open air market, through the streets, past donkey carts and people's garbage. More garbage towers from old pickup trucks along the way. Spills are unimportant because, after all, they end up on the streets, which is full of garbage. If you continued on, you would come to a valley about the half of the size of a football field, which is in essence a large pit or incinerator where the waste that cannot be recycled is burned up. There is no greenery there. There is no growth in Garbage City. The streets are literally compressed garbage. If you look down as you walk, you may see an old squashed can, a dead cat, and rotted food. As you look around, you will see heaps of garbage, though some of those piles are in hidden places. The smell of the place is often pervasive, not surprisingly, and when you leave there, it sticks to your clothes and your hair. To go there is to be surrounded by, to wade through garbage. There is, however, a surprising aspect of this place called Garbage City. You can find there as well, if you walk around the city past the valley of incinerating garbage, you will come to a clean place. You will come to a place with white walls and concrete floors. And there you will see a room of woven handbags and placemats displayed. Hanging on the walls of another room there are quilts, beautiful made quilts, comforters, and pillow covers. Women are there amidst the garbage, sorting rags according to color and placing them in different baskets. Others work at 2 looms, creating beauty out of garbage. If you continue on down the steps, you will hear the sound of water in large tubs as bags of shredded paper dissolve into pulp. Women in rubber covers are working with this garbage, and they're pulling up the sieves from the vats and stacking them into the press. And what they're making is brand new paper. The paper is then dried in the light, and in the cards are places full of gold embossment, marbled designs. So the filth of Garbage City has ended up in paper, which is then designed with gold. More beauty out of garbage. There's a Coptic church in the garbage community, which began as a Sunday school years ago. And if you walk walk through Garbage City and up to the mountain alongside the chirping rats, yes, the chirping rats, soon you will enter one of two church caves. Those caves sit 10,000 people who come to worship there. Thousands of people gather, people whose lives are full of garbage, people who work with garbage, people who smell like garbage. They come for praise and preaching and beauty in the midst of their work in Garbage City. I first learned about Garbage City from a woman who had been there, and I was fascinated by the concepts embedded in the reality. And then spent more time sometime later listening to a young college student who had been in Garbage City for a length of time to work with the people there. She wore a ring on her hand, and she showed it to me. And she said it had been given to her by a young woman in Garbage City, and the ring was beautiful. And she said, it is made of garbage. She spoke about the difficulty of looking down at her beautiful ring and finding it hard to believe that it had been made of garbage. It is hard, she said, to hold both images simultaneously, beauty and garbage. I have found through the years that it is often God's way with me to teach me about himself and about life in the most unexpected places. Garbage City was one of those surprises. When I first heard about this place, it was in the middle of a day with clients that included violent, chronic sexual abuse, addiction to pornography, chronic sexual abuse twice more, and a parent with a terminally ill child. The child really got to me on the inside, and I drove home that night weeping. At some point, I found myself banging on the steering wheel, saying, "Dear God in heaven, I live in Garbage City." At that moment, on my CD player in the car, a beautiful soprano voice began singing an anthem by George Frederick Handel, based on Psalm 96:9. "O worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness." My day and that verse crashed together in my head and my heart, and I found myself asking God to teach me about beauty in the midst of Garbage City, the Garbage City that I find and live with in my work. So here are some of the things that I have learned since that night. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to see that we actually do live in Garbage City. I live in a lovely home. I have a loving husband. I have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren. I get up in the morning and I go to a job that I love with colleagues who enrich my life. I am immensely grateful for all of that. I have, compared to many people on this planet, a life filled with beauty. But I also know that the world in which we live is full of garbage. How is it that I know I live in Garbage City? Well, I know I live in Garbage City because I've been to Rwanda. Beautiful country, but I've stood in a church full of bones. I know I live in Garbage City because I have watched the faces of old women who fled Kosovo, having lost their entire families to ethnic cleansing. I know I live in Garbage City because there are children in many countries who are forced to fight as soldiers, who are sold as sex slaves, or who are dying of AIDS. I know I live in Garbage City because one day I spent the whole day walking through Auschwitz. It's more than that, however, for Garbage City is not just a place that is seen and heard on television and in the newspapers. That spills out all over my office hour after hour. I hear the details of the sexual abuse of 5-year-old girls and 8-year-old boys, abused by youth pastors and camp counselors. I sit with women whose facial bones have been rearranged by a man who calls himself a Christian husband. I sit with women whose husbands are locked into internet pornography, or perhaps prefer prostitutes to the women to whom they had said, I do. I know I live in Garbage City because I sit with pastors who are suffering terribly with the places that they work and the split churches and betrayals and slander. I sit with missionaries, some who have been kidnapped, tortured, and raped. Why? Because they wanted to tell other people about Jesus. I know I live in Garbage City because I also sit with pastors who have sex with the women or teens they have been called by God to shepherd. I sit with missionaries who molested those they went to serve. And I sit with Bible teachers who solicit children. It is even worse than that, I'm afraid. For not only are you and I surrounded by garbage, the truth be told, we create garbage of our own. We have been guilty, some of us, of using our clients to meet our needs, if not sexually, then at least emotionally, taking from those who come to us needy. We court money, fame, and approval at the expense of our faith and our integrity. We have undealt with pain ourselves and difficulties in our own lives and marriages. Some of us hide behind addictions to alcohol or to pornography, even as we work with those who come for help in such areas. You and I do indeed live in Garbage City. To live in the real Garbage City is to be impacted by the garbage. When you live with garbage and work with garbage, you start to smell like garbage. If you were there in that city long enough, the smell permeates everything. And even if you walk away from the garbage, somehow it will still be in your skin. There's a professional term for that in our field. It's called secondary traumatic stress disorder, or another name is vicarious trauma. The process of attending to the garbage that is in this world and in our work can result in harmful effects for us, not unlike those experienced by our clients. These symptoms can include exhaustion, sleep difficulties, irritability, depression, a sense of helplessness, callousness, cynicism, substance abuse, poor work performance, inability to concentrate, and withdrawal. To sit with sin and suffering, which is what we do, with any empathy at all, is to become vulnerable to the emotional and spiritual effects of vicarious traumatization. The lesson of secondary trauma is that garbage is contagious. Jung spoke of a similar phenomenon occurring when he was working with psychotics, and he referred to the damage of what he called mental contagion, the adverse effects on a personality from another personality. Judith Herman, in her excellent book, Trauma and Recovery, said that engagement in the work of trauma poses some risk to the therapist's own psychological health. That is true, even on a much milder scale. What happens when you walk into a group of people who are in the process of criticizing someone or something? The most natural thing in the world is for us to join in. Garbage is contagious. If that is true in the everyday social realm, how much more so when we sit with day after day, garbage after garbage? Do we really think we can wash our brains with stories of incest and hatred and violence and disease without the poison of it all saturating our persons and our lives? In the midst of it all, you and I sit, having somehow gotten the idea that it is possible to make beauty out of garbage. That is in essence what we're about, isn't it? We have this notion that rags can be transformed into beautiful wall hangings and trash into marbled paper. And so we teach and supervise and train and counsel others toward that end. And it happens, doesn't it? Some of us have seen the fragmented minds that we've worked with become whole. or the broken lives of incest survivors transformed into lives of beauty. We have seen addicts clean, victims made safe, marriages restored, and the fearful learn to love others. We work together as researchers and teachers and counselors and pastors day after day, hoping to see beauty in a garbage-filled life. But it takes its toll, doesn't it? Some of you are weary. Some of you have lost sight of the beauty and you feel hopeless, not just for other people, but for yourself. Some of you are sitting here today with private lives full of garbage and ashamed to get help. And some of you, if given a checklist for secondary stress disorder, would fill in all the blocks. You are burnt out. One of the great dangers of this field is what I encountered on my ride home that day. There is the danger of seeing and sitting with so much garbage that you don't see beauty anymore. Remember how the student who had been to Garbage City said, it's hard to hold the two realities of garbage and beauty simultaneously. The garbage can be overwhelming. It often seems far more pervasive than the beauty. There's another danger, and that is the danger of sitting with garbage for so long, you lose your ability to recognize it for what it is. You get numb. You've seen so many bad things that a little bad doesn't seem bad anymore. And then you become blind to your own garbage. The hideous result, of course, is that instead of helping make beauty out of garbage, we simply mix our garbage in with the garbage of others. It's an odd business, making beauty out of garbage. When you think about it, how can such a thing be? Can it really be done? And if so, how are we to assist others in making beauty out of garbage without becoming garbage ourselves? How are we going to be able to continually draw near to disturbed minds and hearts and not become disturbed ourselves? What will enable us to do this work? And what, oh, what will we do with our own garbage? If you recall, I said earlier that the juxtaposition of my day and the anthem, "O worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness," made a crash in my head. I have found that the answer to my plea of that day, teach me beauty in the midst of garbage, lies in another crash. A crash far bigger than the one in my head. A cosmic crash. It is a place, an event which we know of as the cross. On that cross was a crash that shook the earth on its foundation, darkened the midday sun, opened graves, and rocked hell. It was the crash of the greatest and most hideous garbage ever known up against the purest, loveliest beauty ever known. I fear that the very thing which is central to who we are in our identity and what we do in our lives and our work often takes a back seat. Outside of the cross, you see, there is no hope for the garbage or the people who make it. There are a lot of skills in this group listening, I would assume. We could probably find somebody among us with expertise in almost every mainstream therapeutic intervention known to mankind. And yes, such skills are needed, and we need to sharpen those tools, but they don't make beauty out of garbage. There are a lot of theories in this group as well. There are some brilliant minds listening today. Theories and brilliant minds don't make beauty out of garbage. Now, I'm all for top-notch skills and brilliant theories. As a matter of fact, I believe as Christians, we should outshine the secular world with these matters, for we are called to excellence in everything by our God. However, we dare not forget that it is the cross of Jesus Christ that is the only hope of beauty in this world and in ourselves. One constant danger is that we cry out, behold this new method, behold this training, and we forget to cry, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the garbage of this world. Are you discouraged today? I'm sure some of you are. Weary with the work with pain, weary of the suffering of others that you hear and feel every single day. Or perhaps you are weary and sick with your own garbage. It is at the cross, and only at the cross, that you will find yourself able to say with Christian in the Pilgrim's Progress, "He has given me rest by his sorrow and life by his death." In other words, in the place of greatest garbage, the cross, my garbage is exchanged for beauty. Listen to what I have seen in my quest for how to see the beauty of God in Garbage City. You who in your work sit with the litter of hell, let me show you garbage transformed into eternal beauty. You who see the tentacles of the underworld and touch sin in the raw, come, and I will show you glory right in the middle of decay. The cross is without question the place of greatest garbage. There we see garbage most intense, pervasive, and strong. So strong, in fact, that it appears to destroy and obliterate all beauty. The cross is a place of death and evil, decay and wrath. It's a place of darkness, thirst, isolation, rejection, abandonment, and bondage. It is the absence of God and all that is good. It is, in fact, hell itself. The cross is the personification of garbage. And whom do we see there? We see the lily of the valley, the rose of Sharon. We see the fairest of 10,000, the beauty of God incarnate, and we see purity and holiness, infinite love, compassion, and eternal glory. And all that beauty, which is beyond the comprehension of our finite minds, is crushed, destroyed, poisoned, stained, silenced, and murdered. Beauty, like the earthly sun, is eclipsed. If beauty is eclipsed, what does that leave? Nothing but garbage. If heaven is killed, we are left with hell. The garbage that has swallowed up beauty. Death has swallowed life. We might as well quit our jobs, my friends, for what's the point? Who wants to spend a life merely rearranging other people's garbage? But you and I know that it is not the end of the story, don't we? Or do we? Have we forgotten? Have we lost sight of what followed? Do we live functionally as if garbage is preeminent? Or do we live personally and professionally as those who remember that all beauty is triumphant and is in our midst and in our hearts? What happened that day? Well, let me tell you. Decay was transformed into glory, death swallowed up by life, evil was transfigured into holiness, and the wrath of man into praise. Darkness was changed to light, and hell defeated by heaven. You think about the transformation of thirst to living water, of brokenness to the bread of life. Alienation led to restored relationship, and bondage led to freedom. There is indeed beauty in Garbage City. What colossal warfare has been fought in the body of the lone figure hanging from the cross. Herein lies hope for Garbage City, both the one within us and those without. If garbage can be transformed into beauty on such a scale as this, then surely we can, in our small lives or in the lives of our clients, see tastes of garbage becoming beauty. And I know it can be so, for I've seen it occur again and again over the last 50 years, both in my life and in the lives of those who I sit with. It is at the foot of that cross that we have the answer to the garbage city we work in. It is at the cross that we have the answer to my plea that night on the way home: show me beauty in Garbage City. It is at the cross that we have hope for our own garbage. And it is at the cross that we have a defense against the rages of others' garbage. The cross, a thing of beauty, that's a very odd thing to say. The ugliest of ugly, a place of beauty. But it is the cross, you see, that we behold all the beauties of Jesus made clear. All of his love is drawn out there. All of his character is expressed. The wounds of Jesus are far fairer than all the splendor of this world put together. The cross is indeed a place of beauty. There's a woman named Amy Carmichael who lived years ago and who worked in India for many years to rescue little girls from, quote, marriage to the gods, which translated means sexual abuse at the hands of priests. She said this: we can only touch evil by virtue of the cleansing blood. Nothing but the white fires of God's holiness suffices for such contacts. Move out from the full stream of Calvary and you will find yourself not only defenseless, but stained. The truth of the matter is that you and I work with sin and suffering. They don't usually tell us that in graduate school. Unless we ourselves grasp the truths and the power of the cross, the hope of the cross will not pass through our lives to others. For we cannot give what we do not have. Not only that, we will be stained by their garbage in our attempts to try. I have found again and again as I work in Garbage City that part of the call of God on my life is for me to deal with my own garbage. Whatever makes me think I can assist another in transformation of garbage into beauty when my own life is littered and untouched. I have been in this field for a very long time, and I have done a decent amount of supervision over the years. And in my own life, as if my own life were not enough of a demonstration, I know from the lives of others that we carry much garbage, helpers that we are. I suspect there's a lot of it listening today. These things that we refer to sometimes as issues or stuff, or with fancy words like countertransference, or simply more palatable words to use than the word garbage. The thing in my history that has hurt me, the hidden attitudes of resentment and rage and fear, are garbage. The brokenness that comes from being sinned against, the anguish of painful tragedies, the addictions to work, the addiction to helping because it makes us feel important and good, the impatient responses we have, the annoyances and anger that spill out of us with resistant or stuck clients who then we turn around and blame. The misuse of power is garbage, or the misuse of emotional intensity is used wrongly. If I am not continually working with such things before the face of God, seeking him to transform such garbage into beauty in my life so that I reflect his character, then I am a danger to those who come to me for help. And how dare I suggest that I lead others to places where I refuse to go myself. What kind of God is that? May you and I have the courage to say with the psalmist, may the beauty of our Lord be upon us. Such a statement requires courage, for it means whatever it takes, or more aptly, asking God to do whatever is necessary. For obviously, such beauty in my life and yours cannot be present until garbage is transformed. And not only must the work of the cross be allowed to touch and transform our own garbage, it also needs to alter our perspective on garbage. You know, if you stay a little bit dirty long enough, or if you hang around in the dirt long enough, then your perception or judgment of dirt gets altered. A little dirty doesn't seem so bad. Only really dirty qualifies as bad. So a glance at pornography or rudeness with a spouse or harshness with a client, what are these compared to addiction, to battering and abuse? Seen in the light of the cross, they are garbage as well. And not only can we fail to discern that a bit of garbage is always significant, we can also fail to discern what is garbage and what is not. How will I know what is transformable in a person and what needs to be burned up and incinerated? I do not want to hold on to that which is garbage, but do I want to toss out what can be beautiful? Of course not. My judgment about such matters is not reliable. Who would have thought that a history of violence and abuse could, by the hands of our God, because of the cross, be made into a person of beauty? What a notion to suspect that death can be transformed into life. And how odd that success and acclaim and approval and the praise of men can be nothing but garbage. During what dung is what Paul calls them. All these words that we appreciate and respect, success and approval, Paul calls them dung, and he counts them as dung. And that scripture is vividly illustrated for me several years ago. I went to speak at a conference in in Pennsylvania somewhere, and a friend went with me. And after I finished speaking, it was nighttime, and we decided to go for a walk. And it was quite late. We were in Amish country, and it was dark, and they don't have streetlights. So there was no light to see anything. And a little way down the road in our walk, we came across a couple of ostriches behind a fence. And for the record, my mother frequently said to me that I go where angels fear to tread. So in keeping with her lifelong assessment, I decided I wanted to see the ostriches up close. I fearlessly and unseeing, of course, because of the darkness, walked across the grass, through the ditch, surrounding the pen, only to discover that I was literally sliding in ostrich dung. It was a most unpleasant experience, unexpected, unseen garbage. When we returned to the motel, I left my shoes outside the room because they were a huge mess. And when I got home, I threw them out. They were hopeless. And that was when the scripture came to me. I do count them but garbage, rubbish. And when Paul said that, what was he referring to? Was he referring to evil or immorality or addictions or violence? No, because you see, by the hand of God, those things that have twisted up a life like that can be made into beauty by God's hands. Paul knew he was a murderer. Paul was referring to self-righteousness, zealousness, law-keeping, a list of grand qualifications that we usually strive for and admire. Paul called them garbage. It's an interesting thought when you look at some of the struggles in the churches today for power and acclaim and riches. Paul said it is dung. The Word of God also says that in comparison to that, the people that we work with, who are often so broken we're not sure there's any repair possibly, can be transformed into beauty by the one who went to the cross. We have it backwards, don't we? We want to take things like evil and violence and abuse and addictions and tragedies and anguish and throw them away like dung. We don't want them. They're worthless. They're in our way. They hinder us. But you see, the message of the cross is that the most unlikely things can be beautiful, made beautiful by our God, and the things we tend to esteem are often truly trash. And if that is so, the cross not only speaks to your garbage and mine, but it also speaks to the broken ones who stream through your doors, feeling hopeless, seeking your help, wanting healing. Because in Jesus Christ, garbage has been swallowed up in beauty. Garbage has been swallowed up, death has been swallowed up in life, and you and I are called to go with hope to those who seek help. The crucial task of therapy, friends, and this constitutes its difficulty, is to make something livable, acceptable, whatever, the intolerable and the unacceptable changed into beauty and not garbage. The garbage is thrown away and beauty remains. It is to make fruitful what is barren, bearable what is unbearable. The crucial task of therapy is to go where we do not want to go and perform what we cannot do. Who is equal to such a task? You? Me? Only one. Only one who knows the power of the cross. Because you see, because of that cross, you and I are now called to go where Jesus went. Where did his feet go? He went among the sick and the dying and the tormented and the terrified. They walked in garbage, and in that walking garbage became beauty as he walked through. Beautiful are the feet of those that bring good tidings. We are told that he makes the place of his feet glorious. Yours and mine need to walk where he walked. You cannot walk with the dual mysteries that we encounter all the time of iniquity and suffering and not be scarred. It will scar you. Secondary stress disorder is a reality of life in this work. But like our beautiful Savior, even as you walk on garbage streets, picking up garbage items, smelling like burning garbage, his work in you and through you will be one of beauty, not just for your life, but it will spill over beauty into the lives of those you see. Why? Because you follow the one who was made garbage for us. I do not think we can survive intact without these truths. They, whoever they are, tell us, and rightly so, that we need to get proper supervision and a balance of work and fun and good sleep and exercise and all those things. And we do need to do that. That is good advice. Follow it. It is, however, not sufficient. You and I are too small for the weight of the world's garbage. You and I have garbage of our own. And apart from the ongoing work of the cross in our lives, you will never see beauty made out of garbage, for such a task is beyond human ability. It is supernatural work. There's a scripture that captures these thoughts in 1 John 5. It says there are dual realities in which we live, and the realities the young college woman had difficulty holding onto as she looked down at her ring, the reality of both garbage and beauty. John says this: we know that we are children of God, and we know that the whole world is under the control of the evil one. We also know that the Son of God has come. Children of God in a world controlled by the evil one, I fear the odds are against us. We are no match for such garbage. Our wits are too slow, our understanding finite, and our strength too frail. But, glorious but, we also know, you know, and I know, that the Son of God has come. Eternal beauty in Garbage City. And in his coming, he walked in our garbage. He was crushed by our garbage. He transformed our garbage. And now, even as we continue here in Garbage City, he has commissioned us to follow him, walking into garbage and letting it touch us. He has also called us to count the things of this age as garbage, the tinsel, the applause, the successes, so that he might work through us to transform garbage into beauty, first in our lives, and then secondly in the lives of those we serve. Do you hear it? You hear the call? Do you hear his voice? It's a hard call, friends. It's a call to be relentless about the garbage in our own lives. It's a call to fight and wrestle with that garbage, pleading with God to incinerate the dross and transform the ugliness in us into beauty. That means we will deal with the hidden stuff in our own lives, whether it is bitterness or an addiction or power seeking. It means that we will seek the glory of the Father without compromise, without stealing a bit for ourselves. It is not a shared glory. It is all his glory. And that means we are not governed by things like success or acclaim or money. We count such things as dung so that we might have Christ, the beauty maker, first in us and then in those we see. It also means grappling with the beauty and the garbage of others, walking with the garbage of mean people, slow people, tormented people, dirty people, resistant people. It requires the supernatural grace of God to live 24 hours a day in the Garbage City, walking in the midst of garbage redemptively, because that is what he did. You know, we often think we have to do exceptional things for God. Well, we have not. We are to be exceptional in the ordinary. We are to make beautiful hangings out of rags and marbled paper out of trash. You don't need me to tell you it's hard. You know that. And you don't need me to tell you that you're going to be weary sometimes. You know that. And I know that many of you came today weary, wondering if you can continue. The battles with our own garbage will last a lifetime, I'm afraid. Add to that the battles with the garbage of others, and it is easy to see why many quit. Add to that the battles of others all around us. Many get discouraged. Do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, easing toward death, the ultimate garbage, of course. Inwardly, because of Jesus Christ and the cross, you and I can be renewed not only daily, but literally moment by moment as we walk and live and counsel. For our life and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory, an eternal beauty that will far outweigh anything that has burdened us down here. Fix your eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. And what is unseen? The ultimate eternal beauty himself. And then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the first heaven and the first earth, which was Garbage City, had passed away. I saw the holy city coming down from heaven and out of God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. That's Garbage City transformed. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with the people of Garbage City, and he will live with them, and they, you and me, will be his people. And God himself will be with them and be their God. And he will wipe every tear from your eyes, whether it's tears for something in your own life or tears for those you serve. And there will be no more death, no more pain, no more crying, because the old order, Garbage City, has passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. And he said to John, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. Listen to his voice, what he says to you. I am making everything new. And who is this that speaks words of hope? It is the Lord of glory, the Lord of all beauty, who wears the appearance of a slain lamb as his court dress. He who for all eternity will alone bear the scars of garbage. We won't have any scars of garbage on us, only he. We will be utterly free of all remnants of garbage. But somehow, in that place of great beauty, the most beautiful one of all will bear in his person the scars of ugliness. And for you and for me, those scars will, I think, be the most beautiful sight in all of heaven. God calls out to us, to you and to me as Christian counselors. And his call is like the call to the people of Garbage City east of Cairo, and like the one whose name we bear. Will we be people who are willing to work with the garbage of this world? But will we know and understand that that includes the garbage in our own lives as well as others? And that you and I have no power to rid this world or garbage in ourselves or anyone else of the garbage that is here. That is not what we can do. Our willingness to work is possible only because of the work of Christ on the cross and the power of God exhibited there. We know because of that cross, that beautiful cross, that hideous cross, that we can collect the garbage of this world, our own included, and be redemptive servants used by God to transform garbage from what's in us and what's around us into beauty. And it's my prayer that you and I, like the people of Garbage City, will be willing to walk amidst the rats and through the trash and into the caves, because in those places we will hear worship of the Lamb that was slain. May we count him alone as worthy and beautiful. All else is rubbish. May we desire one thing. May we desire to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek his beautiful face. And then may the glory of our Lord rest upon us as we walk the streets and sit in the chairs of our offices in Garbage City. May he establish the work of our lives, and may he bring his fragrance to us so that we might bring it to others. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Langberg, for that care for our souls and for the work that you're doing. Stay with us, Diane, so that we can start a Q&A. But before we do, I want to share an image that is in our office. It's actually just outside of Dr. Langberg's office that was taken in Garbage City outside of Cairo. Take a look and just let your eyes feast on this picture. To me, this is an example of beauty in Garbage City, not only because it literally is, but because, look, you see the dirt and the decay, and what has been tossed aside is considered not valuable. And here it is. But look at the light and how it shows up on the face of this young woman, and the beauty of her face, even her clothing and what she is wearing. It reminds me every time I walk down that hall that there is indeed beauty in Garbage City, and I need eyes to see it, and eyes to behold what God is doing and making into beauty. Well, we've come to that time where we're going to do questions and answers. And Diane, I'll invite you to turn your camera back on and unmute, because we're going to want to hear you as you are speaking. So we have a few questions that have been posed to us, and I'm going to, because I'm the host, get to start with my own question first. But I want you to tell us this question that we all have, and I know you've been asked a million times. How in the world do you, and you're good, we see you and hear you, how do you keep hope in the midst of such garbage? How, especially when that garbage comes from the bride of Christ, the church itself, either through activity or complicity? It can crush our spirit and make us want to not only pound on the steering wheel, but then go climb under the covers. How do you hold on to hope, and how do you hold on to a connection to the church?
First of all, I don't think pounding on steering wheels and hiding under covers is necessarily a bad thing to do. We are people of the flesh, so sometimes those things actually help. One of the things that I have learned over the years is, which I'm going to talk about a lot more later on in this series, is to seek out beauty. Whenever I see beauty, I'm seeing something of God, whether it's the leaves changing in the fall, or a tulip, or gorgeous music, or whatever. I think it's very easy in this work to cease seeking beauty. We get jaded. And if we let it go long enough, we'll start to think there isn't such a thing anyway. And there is. And so I think that that's very important. I also think it's important that we not be solo. You know, and that's more possible to avoid these days because of all these machines. You know, when I first started out, if you didn't work in a place where there were other people, you could go weeks, months, and whatever working with these issues and never have anybody to talk to about it. And so I think we need to find ways to be there for each other, because of the confidentiality issues, and because also it would be talking with somebody who actually understands what you're talking about. And, you know, we have to be so reticent to speak about it. But I think it's important. I've often asked therapists this, who are struggling, you know, what brings beauty to you? And they often look at me with a blank stare. It's not a question they've ever considered. And it's what we're meant for. And so if you are starving for beauty and you don't even know that or what it is, you're most likely to choose things you think will help you that are not good. So I think it's very important for us to work together in these ways and really make a study of what beauty means to us.
You're talking about making sure we actually take time to do so,
Right. So,
to answer those questions, and to have people around us who are probably poking us and asking us if we have indeed done that. You
yes.
know, just to go deeper with that, there was a question that was asked just about, you know, how we balance the preparing for our work, which requires that we read books and articles and on trauma and trafficking and looking for practical tips how to be better, but that puts us immersed into really hard things. And yet we've got to balance it with that beauty, lightness, refreshment. And of course, the news cycle doesn't help us here as well. Things that you do to actually, you know, practical things that you're actually doing to try to bring that balance into your life.
Well, I'm an early riser, which I suppose gets easier as I get older. But I've been an early riser for a long time, and I have a chair in my home, in my study, and I sit in that chair from 45 minutes to an hour every day, more when I'm not working or something, to meet with my father
Mm.
and, you know, to read and to talk to him and to listen for him and whatever. So That's the first thing that I do. I like books and I'm a pretty big reader, but one of the things I do not do is read books about the things I work with before I go to sleep. So I read books that I enjoy before I go to sleep. I don't read about trafficking or sexual abuse or all kinds of things like that. That kind of work is reserved for other pockets of the week than bedtime. So, I don't want to go to bed with that just jacked up in my head. That's not a good way to go to sleep. So I have bookends in my day. And, I walk, my husband and I walk um, with some regularity, and just being outside helps. We both love beautiful music. So I'm trying to find ways to use my five senses to pour in things that are the antithesis of what I work with.
That's really helpful. And I know you've taught us to do that as well, to even make charts on what does trauma bring into our lives, the stories, and look at all of those features, and then to think about what are the opposites, the antidotes that I need to ensure is coming into our lives. Let's take that question even one step deeper, though. Many of us carry our own wounds, our own significant stories. One of the questions that was posed to us was, what about a trafficking survivor who is now working with victims? They carry their own deep pain, and they're trying to work with others' stories as well. Any particular advice or wisdom that you'd want to add?
Yes, and I certainly know former victims who are working with victims of whatever they were former victims of. And in many ways, they understand in ways that somebody from an outside doesn't quite understand, and they do wonderful work. But it's very easy for that to become all that they do. Partly because the strength of the push to help in those areas, because they know exactly what it's like to be there, uh, really helps that happen. So if somebody comes to see me, one of the things I want them to do is take long enough off that they stop thinking about it every 5 minutes. Somebody will say, "Well, I took a weekend off." Well, that isn't going to cut it. And so I think that kind of, how can I go away like that when these people are suffering, is easily thought about. But that's what our Lord did. He went and sat on mountains and looked at the stars and did all kinds of, went out in a boat. And so that's what we need to do. We need to have spaces in our life that are completely absent of being involved in the thing that we're working with. And that's very hard to do. I would also encourage, first of all, I think it's good for most therapists anyway. But if you have a history of sexual abuse or trafficking or whatever, and you're working with victims of the same thing, I would get myself connected with a really good therapist who understands those things and see them on some kind of regular basis, more than twice a year or something. Because it's a safe place, not only to say what you feel and think and how it's affecting you and all those things you might not say other places. It also is another set of eyes and ears who can say, the last 3 times we've talked, you've gone around the barn about this and not really looked at it. So I think that's very wise. And it's a safe place on many levels. And one of which is you can actually talk about what your work is like, which you can't exactly do at a party. So I would advise both of those things.
That's good. I was waiting for you to advise a good counselor, a therapist for that. So it's a good start for us. For those of us who are walking with others, we ought to take our own advice and counsel, oughtn't we? We only have a couple more minutes for questions, but I want to make sure I get this one. There's two sides to this question. So I'll tell you both sides and let you answer them both in brief. On the one hand, we can be really crushed and wonder, how do we even relate to God, who is sovereign, who seems to allow really horrific things to continue to happen? And we can really struggle with trust of him. On the other side, I know you have learned many things and deepened your relationship with the Lord, and even found new things to know about him in the midst of this awful work. Can you tell me a little bit about how you manage that tension?
Well, it wasn't exactly the smoothest ride in the world. And it had stages in it. And, I spent my fair share of time being angry with him. Um, he was very gracious. But I think part of it is to realize that a relationship with God means that you can get mad at him. You can speak the truth about how you feel. You can tell him you think he's doing it all wrong. He can actually handle that. It's a safe place to do that. And I think that we don't often think that way about God. We're supposed to be nice when we talk to God. And if we're mad at him because we don't understand what he's doing or why he's letting these things happen, then we can't be truthful. I think he rejoices when we come to him with truth, even if we're banging on the door because we're mad not to get in. We don't want in. I think
So,
also we have to, and I will talk about this some, but I have had to learn that people, organizations, churches, whatever, are not him. They are, by his word, called to emulate him, called to be true to him. And it's obvious that lots of churches haven't done that. But I think we have to be very clear in our minds that what we call church is not necessarily what he calls his body at all. That it's these systems and organizations and all these kinds of things that aren't him. They say they are, but that doesn't make it true. So I think we don't really understand that we should be angry. God's angry. He got angry in the temple, cracked a whip and turned tables over twice. And he was angry with them. He called them a den of robbers, which is a safe place for those who steal. That phrase is really appropriate these days in terms of church bodies or organizations or whatever. So if Jesus cracked a whip and turned tables over, I'm not likely to do that because I don't want to go to jail. But I sure feel like it sometimes. And so does he. That's where he is with some of these things.
well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Langberg, for speaking the truth and speaking it prophetically and reminding us that part of our healing and handling of this trauma is to live into the truth and to speak the truth, right? Well, would you bless us with a closing reflection so that we can leave? And I know this comes from your In Our Lives First, Volume 2, that's just out and on Amazon.com. And you can find a link to it on her website, dianelangberg.com.
Yes, I'm just going to read to you what I wrote, which is in the book, Day 4, in case anybody wants to know. Going to places of great tragedy and death is rarely seen as a privilege. I have, however, found it to be so. As a psychologist who has worked with various kinds of trauma for many years, I have learned many eternal lessons in the darkest of places. Ground Zero is one of those. Television shots could not begin to convey the magnitude of the devastation there. The stench hit you in the face as soon as you took an exit from a van. A sea of gray ash rises up with twisted metal protruding in odd ways. The parameters filled with buildings, some partly destroyed, others completely. Many of the buildings had melted facades, and the images were surreal. On one edge of the rubble stands a little church known as St. Paul's Chapel. It was built in the 1700s and has survived many wars. It also emerged intact on September 11th. The chapel is surrounded by a beautiful wrought iron fence, and as we approach the property, my eye catches a computer-generated sign tapped to the fence which said foot care inside. A church offering foot care How like our Lord, who, having loved his own who were in the world, he had shown them the full extent of his love. He poured water into a basin and he began to wash his disciples' feet. There's another sign nearby on the same fence that read, Holy Eucharist, noon today. Foot care and communion. What a beautiful pairing. What a picture of the church, bringing the holiest of things alongside of mercy into a devastated place. I was given the opportunity to go into the pit, as the workers call it, and spend time walking around the workers with a chaplain. I accepted the invitation and arrived dressed in blue jeans and boots. I spent about 5 hours in that pit with the young woman who had been serving every night there, the graveyard shift, walking among the men and women, listening to them and encouraging them and praying for them. The cranes loomed large, and the rescue workers seemed small. When the cranes stopped, the workers picked up their stakes, shovels, and buckets and went to the area where the cranes had been to dig and rake, looking for signs of humanity. We went with them, and we stood by while they dug, praying together for them. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, I realized a group of them were gathering together and raking. The chaplain said to me, they must have found something. I was overcome with grief. Death was everywhere, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I looked up and saw a piece of the facade of the World Trade Center rising from the rubble. At the end of it, the beams formed 3 crosses, brilliantly lit by the powerful spotlights. I put my arm around the young woman that I was with and said, look, he is even here. And then it hit me, the eternal lesson in the midst of the trauma. As the people of God, we have in many ways been called to serve as the rescue workers of this world. Surely this world, for all its beauty, looks something like the World Trade Center to our God, who sees death destroying what he created. He has called us to enter this dark world and search. The rescue workers would never think of making a permanent home in the ruins. The rubble is not their home, nor is this world ours. We have been invited into the fellowship of the sufferings of Christ. We are called into places of darkness and death, for that is where he went. He has called us to serve him in this dark place of death, moving among those who are dead in their trespasses and sins, calling them to life and light. The church is called to bring the holiest of things alongside acts of mercy to a devastated place. We are called to bring the extraordinary, which is the life of the Son of God, down into flesh and blood, down into the ordinary, under the shadow of the cross. We are called because he whom we love entered the rubble of our world and our lives and experienced all the death of this place so that you and I might know life. He bore the destruction of the World Trade Center. He bore all the tragedies of this world. He has borne the selfishness, complacency we display when we try to make this rubble our home. Oh, may we see the eternal in the devastation. May we live for the cross rising from the ashes. May we honor the man of sorrows by our willingness to walk where he walked, washing feet and searching among the ruins because he died. Here is a quote from G. Campbell Morgan, who was an old Scotsman many years ago, and people make fun of the fact that I like to read dead Scotsmen, which I do. And this is what he said: you can take a negative position, that is, look at him and pass by on the other side of the man. But he who does so perpetuates his pain and is guilty of the continuity of his suffering in the presence of humans. There is one alternative. Shall I do good or shall I do ill? The alternatives of heaven admit no compromise. And that is why we do what we do.
Thank you, Dr. Langberg, and thank you for this meditation. Thank you for the things that you brought to us today. Friends, we finished the first week. We have 2 more, and I'll tell you a little bit instructions on what you need to do between now and then. But come next week, next Sunday, same time, 2 p.m., January 22nd, to hear our second installment and to ask more questions. We're going to dig more deeply into our own hearts and our own character. You see, the number one tool we have in helping others to recover is our ability to be a student, a listener, one who is a student of suffering and suffering people. And there are things that help us do that better, and there are things that can get in the way, and that's what we'll be looking at next time. So join us next time. Use the same link that you had to get here to use that for next Sunday, okay? Of course, as we told you, the recording will be sent to you via a link, via email in a couple of days. And so you can have that. That's just for you to have. And if you want to check out Dr. Langberg's contact information and the places to find more of her work, wait around here in a minute. We'll start posting those slides here that you can watch and see how to reach and get access to her in our lives. First of volume 2. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.